Hey guys, it's Proud Cat Lover, and today I'm going to be discussing young adult Crested Gecko care. So here we have today is Snickers, and she just recently turned 1 year and 3 months old, and she also weighs 37 grams as of this month, which is really good for that age of a Crested Gecko. So what we're going to be discussing today is feeding and... oh, no, stay over here on the pillow. We're going to be discussing feeding, handling, housing, all that good stuff. So first we'll start off with feeding schedule and how much to feed. Stay on the pillow. You don't need to be jumping. I know you're active. Anyway, at this age, I normally feed every 2 days, and I normally give them 1/4 of a teaspoon, which does not sound like a lot of food, but when you mix it up with the water, because I obviously use Pangea, when you mix it up with the water, it does obviously expand. Also, every 2 days when these guys get fed, because also additionally the ones that like insects get 2 crickets along with their food, so that just kind of helps a little bit with the protein intake. Obviously they're getting plenty of nutrients from the Pangea food that they get, and it already has insects in it, the one that I feed them, but some of the ones that I have, especially Snickers, who absolutely loves hunting crickets, it's just a treat, an extra treat that they get. So anyway, of course, for these ones, like I said, they get fed every 2 days. They get fed 1/4 of a teaspoon of Pangea. Of course, I always suggest using filtered water. Obviously, tap water is going to have chemicals, and it's going to have chlorine and all the other stuff that, like, it probably isn't even good for our bodies. I personally don't even drink tap water. I drink filtered water, and so do my reptiles and my cat and my dog. So, everybody gets filtered water. Anyway, back to on topic. Housing wise, for this size right now, I would definitely suggest, if you had one about this size or a little smaller, using in 12 by 12 by 18. That's the basic starting out size for the tanks for young adult Crested Geckos. You could do as big as an 18 by 18 by 18, which is a little bit bigger when it comes to width and depth. Obviously the height is going to be the same, which is perfectly fine until they're about 2 to 3 years old. Then, normally once they get over that age, I would definitely suggest moving them into a permanent home, which is the 18 by 18 by 24. But, housing-wise, like I said, normally a 12 by 12 by 18, or that equivalent, is perfectly fine. So, with some of my temporary keeping babies that I'm trying to sell or, get new homes for, they are kept in containers that are almost that size, but they're not as tall as the ones I'm talking about. I believe they're 12 inches tall and they're 17 inches deep. Now, if I were to turn them on their side, then that would be perfectly fine height-wise, but they wouldn't have a lot of space to move around on the floor, which I don't really think they would care. Either way, they don't mind. Obviously, if I had enough space to turn the tanks on their sides, I would. Because you can see there are these tanks here. They're still decent height, and as you can see, well, let me move real quick. Okay, so I went ahead and grabbed it. So this is the tank that I'm talking about that I have mine in, and this is actually Snickers' sister, so you guys can see real quick the difference between a gecko that likes crickets and gets that extra protein versus a gecko that does not like insects at all. So you can just see the size difference between, and these two are hatchmates, so they are full-on sisters. Hey, stop moving. Stop for just 2 seconds. Just 2 hey. Just 2 seconds. Stop. Hold on a sec. Okay, I got them to hold still for 5 seconds. Anyway, as you can see, Toffee is way smaller than Snickers. Toffee is still a decent weight at 24 grams, but Snickers is at a lot larger weight at 37. So you can see the lot further along baby versus the one that's just a little bit slower growing because she doesn't like insects. They both get fed the same amount of food, both get fed every 2 days. One likes crickets, one does not. I normally have 4 to 5 plants in this container so that it offers plenty of shelter. I'll go ahead and show you real quick what the tank should look like if you have one set up. So here is Snickers tank. These bird bridges here you can get at PetSmart in the bird aisle. This one here is actually a mini, so it's not the full length one, and it works perfect for this tank. And then we have this vine here. We've got 2 plants on the side here, 2 on this side, and then we've got the hide down there in the bottom. She really likes to use her bridge, and she also sleeps on this plant on the door. So that is her tank. And you can see this one here, which Mischief loves to poop on the front of his tank because he's disgusting like that. Anyway, he has one on the door as well for extra privacy. He has 2 on this side, 2 on this side, 1 on the back, and then he has this one here and his little hide there that he likes to use occasionally. So there's some ideas. Over here we have Indigo, and of course the ones I'm keeping are the ones in tanks. So this one here is Indigo's tank. As you can see, she has 2, wait no, just 1 plant on this side and 1 here. We've got 1 on this side, 1 on the back, 1 here, and 1 on the front, and a cork log in the center. And she has just for a ledge, just because I don't use those because my water dishes are too big for those. But that just gives you an idea of some hides for them. Okay, so anyway, now we'll discuss handling. If you have had your Crested Gecko for a decent amount of time when they were, if you got them when they were younger and they've grown into a young adult, then you should hopefully have it tamed already if you've handled it at least 2 or 3 times a week for max of 30 minutes when they're this age anyway. If they're younger, you obviously don't want to stretch it out that long. Maybe do 15 to 20 minutes depending on the age. If they're really young, I would do maybe max of 5 to 10 minutes. But when they're this age, you can handle them for about 30 minutes or so before they just get tired of being handled. Obviously, as a full adult, 3+ years old, and maybe sometimes you might have a 2-year-old gecko that does not mind being handled for a long period of time, but all of mine that I have that are adults, more tolerable when they're older versus when they were younger. So anyway, once they get to adult age, maybe an hour or 2 at the most, before they will kind of start to get stressed or just don't want to be handled anymore. So anyway, when it comes to handling, you obviously want to be real gentle, just like scoop them up from the front, or if you want to just let them walk onto your hand, which normally doesn't happen all the time because they might just be sitting there like I don't want to go anywhere. Obviously I would not suggest picking them up from the tail. If you do have a young baby, I would get them used to being touched on the tail so they're not finicky. With mine, all of them have been, kind of accustomed to me touching their feet like this, real gentle, touching their tail, and she's going to jump, boop. But just because I didn't want them to be afraid to be handled or touched in those areas, not handled obviously, you do not want to pick them up from the feet or the tail. Now if you needed to, which does not happen very often, you can slip your fingers under their tail and lift them up like this. Doesn't hurt them at all, but that's only if you absolutely need to. When they're babies, I would do that all the time because if they'd get into a position where I couldn't grab them easily from the front like this, then I would just do this with my fingers and I'd do this and lift them up and they would just naturally curl their tail just like that. But obviously with my adults, I don't need to do that, so I normally do not do it. Anyway, we've gone over feeding, we've gone over tank sizes. Now we will go over temperature and humidity, which is pretty much the same exact ones for adults. Anywhere from 68 to 77, I think it was I was reading. Anywhere from 68 to 77 these guys can be kept at. Obviously they're going to do so much better if it's more like 71 to 72 to 75. So 71 to 75, that's normally what I keep my room at. It definitely fluctuates during the summer, but that's normally what it goes through. So like right now it's at 73 degrees. Yeah, it's at 73 degrees right now. So normally when it's a warmer temperature, they are going to grow faster if they're young. They're going to be more active. They're going to eat better because they're hungry. Their metabolisms are processing their food faster than if it were to be cold. So if it's below 66, I would definitely be getting a heat source, like you can have a infrared space heater. They're perfectly safe to be running all the time if needed. Obviously they do have a thermostat built in, so once it gets to a certain temperature they will kick off. You can use a ceramic heat lamp, but if you do, you need to have a thermostat to control the heat so that it does not heat up the tank too much. The only kind of light, I think, is those ones that are safe to use because crested geckos don't like light. So a ceramic heat emitting lamp is just pretty much what it sounds like, a ceramic bulb that emits heat. So, but like I said, definitely have a thermostat. You can buy them cheap on Amazon. I got my Jumpstart one on there for like $30 or something, and I've had it, I think, for a good 3 or 4 years, and it's still working perfectly. So humidity-wise, it's, you know, pretty much the same with the adults that you have with the babies. Now, of course, if you notice that they're going to be shedding that day, which normally will happen at least once a month, they normally will be a duller color, and it kind of will look like around the mouth that the color of the skin is different. Like, around the lips, it might look wet, and then on the face, it might look a duller color. That's another indicator that they're going to be shedding, which I already have a video showing what they look like when they're in shed, so I'm not going to bother trying to find if any of mine are in shed right now. But, try bumping the humidity up when you notice that they're going to be shedding. That way they have a successful shed. Normally, you should have a dry out period of about 50 to 60% during the day, no lower than 50%. And normally in the evening, you should have between 80 to 100% humidity. That's when they're going to be the most active. If they're going to be shedding, they're going to be doing it in the evening. Occasionally they might do it during the morning hours, but it's not as common. It's normally always in the evening. So you obviously want to allow, like I said, I cannot suggest it enough. Do not let it stay dry all the time, and do not let it stay humid all the time, because fungal infections can happen if it is humid all the time. They can have respiratory issues if it's dry all the time. It's just not a good idea to let it dry out or be wet for a very long period of time. Like 5+ days is too long. So it's definitely suggested not to let that happen. Now, if you're having issues with humidity, you can use a damp rag, a damp cloth, and cover half to 3/4 the top of the tank if you've got a mesh lid, and that will hold in some of the humidity. You can, of course, like I said, dampen the rag, and that, of course, will provide humidity, because I used to do that all the time, and it worked perfect. People said covering half to 3/4 of the tank with aluminum foil or with plastic wrap works good too. It'll hold in humidity. If you're having issues with it being too wet, sometimes while you're at home and you can monitor the tank, you can have the doors of the tank open, and if you have a fan of any kind, you can have it blowing towards the tank on low. You obviously don't want it to blow really hard because it could scare the gecko quite a bit. But I'm just lucky enough that I have a ceiling fan, which happens to be going right now, so it circulates air and makes sure that it doesn't get too humid in the tank at once. So anyway, guys, I think that's mainly everything I need to discuss. I don't want this video to be too terribly long, but anyway, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Thank you for watching, and have a good rest of your day.